Sa gitna ng bawat pagbabago, iilawan natin ang daan. Patungo sa makabagong edukasyon. Buhayin natin ang init ng bagong pag-asa. Ang Globe ay sumusuporta sa pangarap ng bawat Pilipino. Sama-sama, tutuparin natin ito. Globe is with us in leading education forward para sa mas maliwanag na bukas. Tuloy ang edukasyon, tuloy ang pag-asa.
The new school is in! Beating homework deadlines, staying up late to review for an exam the next day, ultimate bonding moments with your classmates, and oh, the smell of fresh notebook leaves. It's fun to look back, sure. But right now, the only way to go is to move forward. Globe is set to make the school year a lot cooler. It's time we create better learning opportunities for students of all ages. And the way to do it is to ride the wave of technology. Imagine waking up to a world where you can learn your lessons even when you're at home, or just about anywhere in the world, all with the help of Globe and its partners. D2L has been transforming the way we see the learning environment for over 20 years now. They continue to keep up with trends and the ever-changing world of technology.
As an education company and a partner to thousands of educators around the world for more than 20 years, our key goal is to help students like you achieve greater heights when it comes to learning. Our Brightspace platform will aid you along the way with its easy-to-use features, complete with tools and functions that will surely give you a great learning outcome. And we're constantly seeking ways to evolve our learning environment so your experience will only get better. You know, honestly, I'm pretty excited for you guys to learn the D2L way.
Globe as an institution is dedicated to empowering every Filipino succeed in reaching their goals and preparing for any challenge they may face. Here at Globe for Education, we can offer you helpful information to empower you in making the decisions required to take your school to the next level. Our wide range of specialized solutions and technologies, as well as our business-grade connectivity, can fit your institution's needs regardless of digital readiness or maturity. Learning never stops, even in these changing times. So together, let's discover new ways to create, collaborate, and communicate. Together, let's recreate the way we learn.
We're so ready for our first lesson. The question is, are you?
PW was founded in June of 1919. They wanted to give Filipinas a better opportunity, a better education so that they could play a more active role in society, but at the same time still being the heart and the foundation of the family unit.
It has produced a roster of alumni who have achieved in their respective field of specialization.
Professors, administrators, and even students are treating each other just like family.
When COVID-19 hit, Metro Manila was declared to be under lockdown.
There was an announcement that there will be online classes and we cannot go back to the classroom.
Can we manage handling classes with this new setup?
Kung mawawalan po ako ng internet, how would I continue my education?
Connectivity and availability of suitable devices was a big issue. So we tried to address that by partnering with Globe. The representatives showed us the capability and the features of the G Suite Enterprise for Education. We decided that this was something that we needed. So the university had shifted to G Suite for Education because of its affordability. And as we continue to evaluate and get feedback, that is when the decision to upgrade to G Suite Enterprise for Education, which was more robust.
They make applications and softwares that are free and accessible to all students. G Suite offers variety of tools that made it easier for me to think of more creative ways to deliver the instruction.
Faculty members are happy because students are participative, and of course they are not stressed in using Google Classroom because it's really very simple.
Google Docs is really helpful for us students. They have the feature of being able to change or edit or revision directly.
The Google Jamboard sits like an interactive whiteboard which replaces the whiteboard that I use in a regular classroom.
Google provided us a good platform wherein we can mimic the actual experience of our student in campus. We'll be able to deliver what's necessary for our students.
We intend to still continue using virtual learning even after the pandemic.
The technology allows PWU not only to survive, but also to adapt and to thrive in terms of addressing the needs and the wants of the new generation.
With PW's quality education and with the great help of Google and Globe, the integration of both would result to a great future.
Google Enterprise for Education makes PW future ready because it allows us to deliver education to all of our students regardless of where they are. It will allow PWU to be more resilient, to be less disrupted in terms of delivery of education, of continuity of operations and systems with the help of Google Enterprise for Education.
Good morning, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. This is Usapang Industriya Episode 6, brought to you by the Philippine Association of Colleges and Universities, PACU, National Teachers College, NTC, the Private Education Assistance Committee, or PAC, and Globe Business. I am Ed Fermin, the VP for Academic Affairs of National Teachers College, who will be hosting today's event. To all our participants in our Zoom meeting platform, mapagpalang umaga po. We hope that you are all comfortable. Meanwhile, to all our participants over our live streaming sites, we likewise welcome you to our event. We'd like to invite everyone at this point to gather in prayerful silence as we think of our special intentions and aspirations, especially for the education sector. Immediately after this, we shall have the Philippine National Anthem.
Bayang magiliw, pero sa kasilanganan, alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, ngunit karang magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasising, sa dagat at bundok, sa simay at sa langit mong baghaw, may ilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang sikat ng matawat mo'y tagumpay na nagniningning, ang bituing at araw niya kailan pa may nagmagililig. Lupa ng araw ng aking pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang iligaya na pag may makakit, ang mamatay na dahil sa'yo.
Thank you to the Psychology Chorale of National Teachers College. We shall now welcome the President and Chairperson of the Board of our institutional partner for this episode of Usapang Industriya, which produced the first placer in the secondary level and the 10th placer in the elementary level of the January 2022 licensure examination for teachers. To give his welcome remarks, let us give a virtual round of applause to Mr. Alfredo Antonio I. Ayala from National Teachers College.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ed. A warm good morning to everyone. Wonderful to be here. I do look forward to the day when we can start gathering in person. We're very excited to be here with you today for Usapang Industriya Series number 6, Teacher Education, with our topic, Education and Training Specialists in the Hyflex World. We have 3 objectives today: to articulate the implications of Hyflex learning on teacher education, training, and development. Secondly, to analyze local, regional, and global trends in Hyflex learning that may affect employment opportunities in the education and training sectors. And lastly, to assess the transition needs of teacher education institutions in meeting the demands of Hyflex learning environments. So I'll just give a few short welcome remarks, but first I'd like to greet our panelists. Thank you so much to our panelists for joining us today. We have with us Roger Chow, the Assistant Director and Head of the Education, Youth, and Sports Division of the ASEAN Secretariat. We also have with us Jennifer Lopez, Director 2 of the Bureau of Human Resources and Organizational Development of DepEd, John Arnold Siena, Director 4 of the National Educators Academy of the Philippines, or NAEP, Sarah Cortez as well, the Founder and Learning Group Head of EdVenture, our partner. And of course, our moderator is Dr. Ed Fermin. Allow me to also just thank Dr. Anthony Tamayo, President of PACU, University of Perpetual Help, and Chairman of COCOPEA, as well as Laurice Juarez, Head of the program of COCOPEA and PACU, sorry, and Joyce Samaniego, of course, our tireless Executive Director. And a warm welcome to all of the deans and program heads from the various teacher education institutions who are with us today. So very simply, this Usapang Industriya series coincides with our ongoing preparation, I'm sure all of you are in the middle of this, for resuming face-to-face learning, while at the same time reconfiguring education spaces and systems for hybrid learning. Listening to all the national, regional, and global experts in teacher education, training, and development talk about changing demands, qualifications, and career pathways is essential in our evolution of the education sector, which all of us are co-creating as we speak. While everyone regards the high in Hyflex as referring to hybridity or the blending of learning modalities, NTC believes that in addition, we should also be mindful of the gradual emergence of hyper learning, which simply means to increase and level up energy in constantly innovating the education and training services sector. This energy is not just about the use of technology or new methods, but more importantly, about what needs to be learned and how they match the demands of various industries that, of course, have been undergoing a tremendous amount of change because of COVID. Instead of the usual talks, Dr. Ed and the organizers have devised a very conversational format for this episode, which really gets to the heart of what we're trying to do in the education and training services sector, which is to facilitate the vigorous exchange of ideas and insights that can fuel innovation through a Hyflex approach. So with that, a warm welcome again to all of you, and I'm looking forward to a very engaging discussion. Back to you, Dr. Ed.
Thank you so much, President Fred, for that very heartwarming and, of course, inspiring message that truly sets our aspiration towards pursuing hybrid and hyper flexible learning happen in the Philippines. And we'd also like to express our gratitude to our program partners, the Private Education Assistance Committee and Globe Business. We shall now transition to the highlight of this morning's event, which Fred aptly described as a conversation. And as a conversation, it is important for us that both our panelists and our attendees are able to interact. While our attendees are limited to writing down their insights and their queries using our chat or our Q&A mechanisms, please, by all means, write down those thoughts because they matter in the way we are going to craft our ideas, our recommendations, even in the course of our conversation. Fred has already given us an appreciation of our objectives, which are threefold for this morning. And just to reiterate, and as we are showing now on your screen, we are going to look at implications of Hyflex learning because everyone is talking about it right now. Along with that, we will be analyzing local, regional, and global trends, especially that we have with us today someone who has been monitoring these trends. And of course, we'd like to assess how ready are our teacher education institutions, which most of you are managing right now in terms of meeting those demands. In fact, I'm very happy to know that some of my friends and colleagues in the Philippine teacher education sector are in attendance today. Shout out to all of you. And I know that this is going to be an interesting discussion because we are wanting to find out what else should be placed in our teacher education programs. So let's now get to know the members of our distinguished panel. Now, what we're going to do after I have briefly introduced each of them, we will ask them to respond to our first question. So,
Dr. Ed, excuse me.
Yes,
Dr. Ed,
go ahead, Fred.
Before you proceed, sorry, may I just also be allowed to recognize the championship and leadership of Dr. Emon Reyes, who is the champion of Usapang Industriya as chair of the Committee of the Industry and Academe Linkages Committee. I just really wanted to thank him for kicking off this entire series. So thank you, Dr. Emon. Back to you, Ed. Apologies. I forgot.
Thank you, Fred. And yes, Dr. Emon, you're an inspiration to us as we try to understand how the tight relationship between academia and industry should really be facilitated at this time. And speaking of that, today we have a powerful panel who has been looking at that tight connection between academia and industry. So as I said, after I have introduced them briefly, we will ask them to concentrate on our first question, which is bordering personal and professional dimensions. So our first question that we'll be asking from them after I've introduced them is shown on the screen. We are intrigued and interested in finding out what new skill or talent as an educator were you able to discover or enhance in the course of the pandemic. If it's something that has will demand that you demonstrate later. So be careful, because if I ask you that you show us how much you have learned how to sing, you have to do that in our live conversation today. No, just kidding. So let me now introduce the first member of our panel, who is the founder of Adventure, formerly known as the Dutiful Teacher PH. Although she no longer works in the classroom, her advocacy to promote early language literacy in the Philippines continues. She wrote her first ever copyrighted publication entitled Phonics for Non-Readers, and has been actively engaging in international spaces towards the promotion of literacy. I'd like all of us to warmly welcome Ms. Sarah Cortez. Sarah, good morning, and please, we would love to hear your response to our first question.
Hi, Doc Ed. Good morning, and good morning to my fellow educators. It's a lovely day today, and it's an honor to be here. So, first question, this is really intriguing and quite interesting. So, I think one of the talents that I discovered when pandemic hit is my entrepreneurial skills. Okay, so for 8 years, I've been a classroom teacher. And I was one of the teachers who lost job during pandemic. And therefore, I've decided that other than being a classroom teacher, I believe that we can do more. I can do more, just like any other educators. With that, I saw the problem that all of the teachers are experiencing. And they received reduced salary, teachers lost their jobs. Therefore, I realized that as an entrepreneur, if there is a problem, there definitely is a solution. And therefore, way back 2020, I started to found Adventure. So Adventure is an online learning platform that provides online services for students from preschool up until grade 10. So yeah, that's it. Thank you, Doc Ed.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Our next panelist works at the Department of Education as Director of the National Educators Academy of the Philippines, the learning and development arm for nearly 900,000 employees of DepEd. Wow, you're nearing the million mark. Now, prior to his stint at the NAEP Central Office, our panelist has served in the DepEd field, rising from the rank of a classroom teacher, and then to assistant schools division superintendent, and then to regional director, and so on and so forth. And now he brings with him his expertise in dealing with a variety of learners and teachers, of course, and now including supervisors and school heads. Obtaining his degrees from the West Visayas State University, a center of excellence in teacher education, a Master of Education in the University of the Philippines in the Visayas, as well as the Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand, and of course, from the Asian Institute of Management. So the combination of his academic qualifications and his actual field experience, I tell you, is very much inspiring for all of us wanting to serve the education and training sector. He's currently completing his Doctor of Education degree, and we're happy that he's with the team of our prized education students at the National Teachers College. As a member of the governing board of the Simeo Regional Training Center, or Simeo RETRAC, he indeed has an appreciation of both regional and national needs in terms of teacher education and training. Friends, join me in welcoming and, of course, listening to the response of Dr. Yes, that's a foretelling, Director John Arnold Siena. Good morning, Director John.
Good morning, Dr. Ed. Good morning, everyone, all our participants to this panel discussion. Thank you very much for that very generous introduction. Regarding the question, I'm not sure whether I have a talent. I've been asking myself what my talent is really. In reference to COVID-19, the pandemic, which really changed our lives, turned our lives upside down. because of the change in work arrangements in the office, we have to deal with with different kind of how to deliver your much needed outputs and even deliver outcomes for the basic education system. And this is not a impacting on my work, but this is really a general experience in the Department of Education as in anywhere else, right? And comes with it this blurring of work and home, concerns. And it could not be avoided that sometimes you extend up to the wee hours of the night just to be able to finish. And it has come to a point where you don't know anymore whether this is still home or this is still work. And I came to realize that I need to also set some boundaries as well. Although of course it should be integrated, right? But at a certain point I needed to also master self-care, being mindful of what you're feeling and how you are. In fact, in one of the sessions on mindfulness seminar, I just my tears just kept on falling. I mean, I didn't realize that I was already crying while I was trying to explain what we were doing in the National Educators Academy of the Philippines. And I also got something from you, Dr. Ed, in one of your sessions with us, creative diversion. I think this is one of the more important things that I have learned to be able to divert from work and spend some time as well on things that you really love. Reading is, for me, that is my creative diversion. So yeah, that's how I cope with the pandemic. Thank you. And I don't know whether that's a skill or a talent. Thank you.
I think that's a combination of all those things that may be identified as a talent, a skill, and of course also as a disposition and attitude. And thank you, Director John, for shepherding all our training divisions over at NAEAP in order to reach out to all our teachers. And just to let you know, Director John is on top of all these major training programs in the professional development program division of NAEAP. And currently, the amount of work in that area, particularly for training teachers as we transition to Hyflex learning, is tremendous. So maraming salamat po sa lahat ng tiyaga at pagsusumikap. And now we move on to, there should be a second member coming from our Department of Education. Unfortunately, Director Jennifer Lopez cannot join us because she is leading her team in the ongoing ISO certification of DepEd Central Office. But at any rate, she sends her regards, and actually we have woven in our discussion the inputs of Director Lopez, which we will share later. Now we move on to the last member of our panel this morning, who I think is a beacon of light and hope in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in his current work as Associate Director of the Youth Education and Sports Group of the ASEAN Secretariat. You know, one thing that you should know about our last member of the panel is that he has always demonstrated that keen Filipino sense of transformation and of passion to make education something accessible and of high quality. Particularly that for the longest time, he has been working as an esteemed consultant to various international organizations, including the UNICEF and the UNESCO. Armed with his backgrounds in business, in technology, project management, and advanced degrees in lifelong learning from the Pedagogical University of Denmark, and a doctoral degree in Asian and International Studies from the City University of Hong Kong. He has written tons and tons, I would say tons, of research policy documents that really have made an impact in various spheres of education and training, not only in the Philippines, but most importantly in the ASEAN and the world at large. I'm very, very pleased that he can join us today because he serves as the Filipino voice in the ASEAN and the ever-expanding global community of educators and trainers. Please help me welcome Dr. Roger Chow Jr. Good morning, Roger.
Thank you, Dr. Ed. Wow, that was a very generous introduction. But anyway, thanks. You asked about what skills and talents I have learned or acquired over the past few years during the pandemic. I was mostly engaged in project work and consultancy. So one of the things that was new, because I've used consultancy, particularly ICT in my work before the pandemic. The most significant talent or skills that I've learned is actual discussions and dialogue with various government agencies, particularly those non-English speaking countries, because it was rather challenging. So in particular, I did this UNESCO project focused on developing teacher promotion criteria in Myanmar. So essentially, it's different when you actually were in the country to do field work and discussions and interviews. So that's one aspect. The second aspect there is I had to deal with exchanging ideas and actually coming up to a consensus with various reviewers of projects, which I did for the European Commission. Normally, we meet in person because it's not easy to actually discuss different views and come out with a consensus on scoring. But then we had to do it because there was no choice, but we managed to do it. So, sorry. Being forced in a circumstance where you have no choice due to environments, pandemics, or anything, actually leads to innovation and to a certain extent acquisition of new skills. So thank you. That's basically what I have to add.
I think aside from that, Roger, if I may, Roger has actually been able to demonstrate how living on a plane looks like in what will become the post-pandemic environment. Being a policy analyst on the ground means that he would need to travel from one place to another. But it doesn't seem that his health condition is affected by it. In fact, I think, Roger, you're much healthier now.
That's true. That's also because I don't really do exercise much because of the COVID issue.
Okay, thank you so much, Roger, Sarah, and John. We are now ready to move towards the specific points that we have designed to be explored today with our participants. And what I would love our teacher education specialists in the call to do is to pay attention, as these are discussion points that you can also start using as springboards for discussion in your respective institutions. Let's talk about the emergence of Hyflex learning. Some months ago, PACU launched a webinar that talks about the hybridity of learning, which is basically the combination of available modalities. But did you know that in 2015, Professor Kevin Carey of the Harvard Business School launched the book entitled The End of College, Creating the Future of Learning and the University of Everywhere. He asserted that in 10 years or so, that was 2015, the concept of the University of Everywhere will challenge everything we know about the design and delivery of education and training services and products. Now, if one were to take a closer look at his analysis, he was actually pointing out that the hybridity of learning and training modalities will be the primary feature of the education sector. It's just that it wasn't 10 years. It was even much earlier than he expected. No? So what we're going to do is to ask Roger and John at this point, based on your awareness and analysis of the impact of COVID-19 to the education sector, is Carey's assessment correct? And after they have shared their inputs, we will ask Sarah, who was directly affected by this, to give her feedback. All right, Dr. Roger and Director John, please. Thank you.
Do I get to respond? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go
John.
ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is very interesting, and thank you, Dr. Ed, for introducing the book to me. Unfortunately, I was not able to read this book, but I sort of, when I saw this in our discussion guide, I sort of made some preliminary research online, and yeah, very interesting book. Which reminds me actually of even as early as in 2004, when I was doing, as you pointed out, I did my communication studies at Victoria University in Wellington. And as early as that time, we were already discussing the future of university education. And my professor, who used to be a teacher also at De La Salle, she's a Sri Lankan, but she's also but she taught at the LSU before moving to New Zealand. And one of the things that she actually was posing on in the class was the future of the university with all this technology, developments in technology and so on. And and very rich discussion because our class was composed of several, the class is composed of representing different nationalities. But in fact, during that time also, we were already doing the hybrid. I remember that I had classmates who were based in Australia, some of them were in Europe, and and of course on site, at the university itself. And the experience was, very interesting because there was a challenge, of course, of connectivity and all. But that already, to me, already showed how hybrid, at a certain point, certain level of hybridity in delivering education. Now, so when I went back to the Philippines and to look at whether we can actually move to that, I was faced with a blank wall because a lot of things that we're doing in the country are really very, the conditions are not there, I should say. But in 2020, when COVID struck, we were pushed to the wall. And we had to make the important decision to shift from face-to-face to distance learning. And we were not only looking at, the changing the, using printed modules as our main way of delivering education, but also looking at the technology that we have. Unfortunately, though, our technological capability and capacity in the country, and so far as basic education is concerned, is not that robust. In fact, if you look at the figures, 95% of the schools, almost 96% of the schools, resorted to modular distance learning rather than using mainly online learning. However, I'd like to point out that even while we have the most dominant modality is the modular distance learning, some of the schools actually already were experimenting on using online learning. So it's already there's already some form of hybridity there, some blending of modalities there, but not in a very systematic way. When I say systematic way, it's that is really a local initiative rather than a policy. So I would say that the COVID-19 actually pushed us ahead of our schedule. In other words, we had to already adapt to the situation by using the technology that we have. Now, in fact, we are already moving towards new normal. And when I say new normal, a lot of our schools have already done, going back to school and so on. But the secretary is also very adamant in saying that we are not abandoning blended learning. In fact, what we need to continue to do is to really explore how online learning will be part of the features of basic education delivery. And I think that is the direction that we're taking. I don't think that we will go back to pre-pandemic delivery of education. As we move forward, we explore further, we experiment further how blending can happen in basic education. And that goes through as well to teacher training. In fact, even as we speak, our staff at the National Educators Academy of the Philippines are specialists are already undergoing training on the use of the professional development learning management system. And we continue to do experiments on what else using technology can we do in order to maximize professional development and training. And because training teachers is more practitioner oriented, we have to be also mindful that teachers learn wherever they are. In other words, they are in their schools. It is, and then therefore the opportunity to learn should be on the basis of their experience. And that's why, to me, coaching and mentoring can still be a very much part of that blending of learning. So it's not just, expert driven, but it has to be something that the teachers themselves are discussing in their own workplace with someone who can help them process their experience. So that's what I see as a way forward for teacher training as well as for basic education.
Interesting, Director John, and I'd like that you mentioned how the training spaces for our teachers should also account for those necessary skills to engage in a hybrid learning environment. Now, let's turn to Roger because I think he has something to say about this also, especially that Professor Carey for the longest time has been working in the higher education space. Roger?
Yes, I do agree that there are going to be significant changes in education, particularly in the higher education space as well. To a certain extent, I do agree with Professor Carey, but the time frame is too short, and I don't agree with the term that the end of college or university or higher education. I would actually say that it is about time that education should be seen in a different light. A refocus or revisiting the issue of individual learning, and there were discussions on personalized learning, and this concept of hybrid Hyflex modality actually contributes to that, and in fact paves the way forward to a certain extent. Of course, there will be significant challenges. So it's a yes and a no. I do agree there will be significant changes, and the pandemic already showed us that, and you mentioned that it advanced the use of technology and digital transformation. So that's the thing. I don't agree that it will be in 10 years. In fact, and definitely I don't agree that it will be the end of the universities or colleges. In fact, it would probably reinforce the role of higher education institutions, particularly contributing to teachers, professions, and something. Of course, there's an interlink between the professional fields requirements and ongoing changes. However, in relation to COVID and teacher education, I do believe that there will be a significant refocus, take note, refocus, not focus, on creativity and innovative skills, which are more generic, which has been discussed over the years in terms of transversal skills rather than specific skills. So there will be more generic skills focus, I believe. I may be wrong, but I think the notion and importance of creating teachers and teachers educators, which contributes to enhancing creativity and innovation and critical thinking skills of students and graduates will be significantly refocused and will be contributing back to our adaptability in a new, more digital environment. In fact, in ASEAN, and the Philippines is actually leading this. We're working on the Declaration on Education, Digital Transformation of Education Systems in ASEAN, which is a manifestation of the importance of digital transformation and ICT and in the education sector. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, good point, Sir Roger. In fact, when Professor Carey's book was finally declared as a New York Times bestseller that same year, there was an article critiquing that concept of the end of college or the end of education as we know it. And he made a very, very good remark similar to what we have just explained. And I guess that has to be reiterated at this point. The way we know education is the one that will really change. And Roger is correct in saying that the set of adaptive competencies necessary will have to be articulated now at the level of policy and programs for teachers and people who will engage in human capital development. And to borrow the words of one of our guests, Professor Leonisa del Rosario, she said that the education would always need an educator, and thus it's just a matter of reconfiguring the skills that make an educator. So Sarah has been nodding her head and has been smiling. Maybe she's ready to give her reflection on the inputs given by Roger. Unless Roger, you want to add something, please go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to add something. John was talking about, I forgot what John was talking about earlier that triggered a comment that I wanted to say now. The importance is how we perceive education, and the move towards outcomes-based education has been significant, right? But John earlier said that the most significant modality is modular distance education, which is really not new. It's been old. And then it's the technology that changed and to a certain extent adapted distance modular education to distance education. And the increasing use of micro-credentials and MOOCs and COIL is still in its infancy. So we can see significant changes over time. And at the policy level, at the EU level, and to a certain extent, some ASEAN countries like Indonesia is already working on recognition on micro-credentials and the initial discussions on key things. So we can see the dynamics happening in the education sector, not only in our region, in the Southeast Asian region, but even in Europe.
Yeah, good. And Roger, you'll be proud because Director John is also leading the path towards making micro-credentialing operate for teacher training and development. In fact, that's part of the relationship that we have started right now, putting in the training that teachers go through, in fact, as convertible micro-credentials. But that's altogether a different discussion, but you're right, and we're moving towards that direction. Sarah, any thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Doc Ed. So in addition to what Roger and John stated a while ago or shared with us, I think it's important to note that the goal of Hyflex is to make both online and face-to-face or in-person experience equal. Okay, so participation in class is necessary regardless of where and how the students attend. So online doesn't mean to be diminished. Hindi na siya mawawala. Forever na siya. And it's a part of our learning process. But it can be an alternative. And therefore, class sessions are not meant to be passive. Just like passive observation, it should be more like an interaction between the students and, of course, the educators, our teachers and facilitators. So it's rather more like fully interactive engagement, including Q&A, group work, if possible, and allowing the student to create some presentation. So again, this is very important, not just for our students, but also for our educators. It's important to note that as we move on to Hyflex learning, we should have educators who are highly skilled, those who knows how to effectively deliver lessons both online and face-to-face, and someone who has the mastery of what, why, and how to teach. I believe we also need an educator or a teacher who is agile and flexible, like a teacher who is updated with the current trends and innovations related not just to education, but to the edtech industry. And therefore, a teacher will be able to change the practice based on the new curriculum, technology, and instructional strategies related to Hyflex. And I think one more thing is we should have a type of an educator or a facilitator who create an environment wherein the students are actively participating, whether this is online or face-to-face, and an educator that allows the student to have to work independently and cooperatively with his or her peers.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. You know, while you were speaking, I was recalling what were the key discussion points in many of the education fora, conferences, and conventions prior COVID-19. And I could feel that some of our teacher educators here are probably saying, uh, weren't those the same things we were looking for before? Only that the conditions might have changed, especially that Director John and Dr. Roder have mentioned that the spaces seem to be evolving quite faster than we imagined it to be. And maybe that's one thing that we should connect with what Sarah was looking for as characteristics or features of the Hyflex educator. Okay, I saw the hand of Director John, and I think there's something that he'd like to articulate. Go ahead, Director John. Director John, if you could just switch on your audio, please.
Yeah, sorry. Just to also point out that in addition to what you mentioned, that we're already working towards micro-credentialing. In other words, we have a very strong collaboration with higher education institutions in terms of how our training programs within DepEd can actually be credited to, higher to degrees and so on. And that is really coming from a also from our policy on the PD curriculum for teachers. So we are working on a PD curriculum that highlights what teachers at different career stages should be able to meet, but also making sure that the learning experience of our teachers in the different professional development actually leverages on the technological potential, right? So, and in fact, our the way we are doing it now is that in fact, even in our budgeting, when we budget, we actually consider that a certain portion of our training programs will be online, will be virtual, will be hybrid, and a certain portion will be exclusively face-to-face. Just to say that in terms of the concept of whether there's an end of college or formal training or face-to-face training is concerned, there will, of course, we don't agree that college will end. Maybe some of the features of how college or how training can be done will definitely change because of these technological advancements that we have. Thank you.
All right. So I think even our panelists are being provoked in terms of the ideas surrounding the issue of how hybrid, how hyper learning will become. No? But I think we will be guided by the expertise of Roger at this point, because, as I was telling you, Roger is the education policy analyst on the go. Okay? And he would always be able to look at these patterns and trends. So we will be asking Roger at this point what he has found out to be the core features of meaningful Hyflex learning provisions, programs, and most importantly, policies. So from the context of our discussion earlier with Professor Carey, we will be looking at some patterns around the globe. And after his input, we will go back to Director John, who will tell us how different are the expectations on Hyflex learning in the Philippines, based on what he has assessed from the ground. So take note for the teacher education specialist in our meeting right now, we will now link the global and regional trends in Hyflex learning, and what we see are the actual needs of the Philippines at this point. So we'll now listen to Dr. Chow.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, I don't think there's significant research done yet to date on Hyflex learning. The focus over the past years has been how to transition and utilize digital technologies in education, particularly the delivery of education, not limited to basic education. Okay, but the core focus has been always how to ensure that our children and students will actually not have this learning discrepancy because of the sudden shift of learning to digital learning mode. The other issue there is the teachers have not actually been trained, or they don't have enough capacity to actually deliver effective learning online. Okay, probably with the exception of open universities. Okay, because they've been in that mode, and that has been their primary mode of delivery. Okay. When was it? I think the second week of March, we organized a closed-door ministerial meeting at the CN Secretariat, focused on, and it was a panel, 3 major panels where ministers or deputy ministers representing their challenges in their own respective countries. The focus, if I remember right, has been changing the curriculum and getting only what is necessary. So basically a significant reduction of the curriculum, of course, focusing on what is necessary. The second thing there is the significant use of modular distance education, just like the Philippines. And then the similar challenges as well across countries, with the exception of Singapore and Brunei, if I remember right, in terms of infrastructure and equipments and internet. So these are the things that are actually very similar to what's happening in the Philippines. I think Director John would agree with me on this. Okay, the focus on Hyflex learning is still not there yet, because we're still in the process of bringing students back to the classroom. Okay. Of course, the discussion on dual modes, basically online and in the face-to-face, will be there in preparation for future disasters and future pandemics. However, capacity is not there yet. And in fact, I believe that we still don't know how to do dual mode, I mean, flex learning approach. You can relate this to the challenges we face when we're doing multi-grade teaching. Okay, when we started this initiative, how much challenges have we actually faced, and we're still ongoingly to date, we're still doing research, action research as well, and even policies to make it more effective. So the notion of flex learning is there. However, initiatives and policies and even research has not been significantly initiated because this is new. Of course, yeah. One more thing before I forget. In relations to micro-credentials and MOOCs, which can also be considered part of Hyflex learning to a certain extent, basically, when we're talking of distance digital learning, we always talk about synchronous and asynchronous, right? So essentially, although flex learning would actually focus on asynchronous, the one that you actually attend similarly, but then the added advantage of being able to review the classes and the lessons through a Hyflex learning mode would actually be significant to students who don't really capture the lessons immediately. However, the core issue that I see is the adaptability and capacity of the teachers and the students, particularly in terms of actual engagement beyond a lecture mode and group work and stuff. I'm not saying it's not possible. It's being done right now. It's just that it's quite challenging if we're talking about an entire education system with teachers and students, considering that capacities of teachers and students vary. And in fact, the concept or desire to actually be online or offline or in face-to-face is also different. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Roger. That's a lot of things that we need to consider. But one strong message that we're looking or hearing right now is that we're not yet there, but everyone seems to be pushing so hard to get there. But there are limitations. Of course, people are saying, yeah, we know that already. But there's an important item that you mentioned and that's the general disposition that you need to accept we're already in need of it. And realizing that need is crucial in order that the provisions, programs, and policies that we are concocting will truly become very responsive, whether you are in a resourced or an under-resourced environment. And incidentally, I think this is one thing that the PACU member schools can do. For instance, National Teachers College is currently collaborating with UNESCO in its Bangkok office to do the national mapping of some sort of provisions, programs, and policies in terms of the transition towards flexible learning. So we will be engaging some of you very soon so that we could understand country-based data analytics on how we have transitioned in all these provisions that we have done. In the meantime, let's ask more granular information on the situation of Hyflex learning in the Philippines. And I think our colleague, Director John Shena, can shed more light into this. Director John, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Ed. I can resonate with many of the points that Dr. Chow, Dr. Roger has pointed out. Spot on. A lot of those points are really spot on. But in terms of our real experience on the ground in basic education, if we're looking at how learners learn under pandemic and employing the different distance learning modalities, we need to really study carefully hybrid flexible learning insofar as basic education is concerned. And as we all know, during the pandemic, even now, a lot of our stakeholders, from legislators to parents to even teachers themselves and the learners and the community, they were really hankering, if not demanding, for face-to-face learning to happen already, because they have realized that a lot of our stakeholders are seeing that during the full distance learning modality, even online learning, this has posed a challenge in the quality of learning experience and the learning outcomes. And we have not yet measured at this point the learning outcomes after the pandemic. But already people are making some prognosis that the outcomes will really turn out to be not as we want to have it, right? So because precisely a lot of conditions are not yet there, as pointed out by Dr. Chow. I think one of those is in the early grades, for example, the issue on literacy and numeracy will always find itself at the core of the discussion on whether we are ready for hybrid Hyflex learning, because this is really the foundation, and and that is one of the barriers why we cannot really implement the full online and even the modular distance learning. And the learners themselves at this point, at their very young age, self-management is one of the things that will have to be developed among the learners when they do distance learning. And this is something that we were not ready in the beginning. And part of that, of course, is the preparedness of our teachers for the modality. And because we were caught flat-footed when the pandemic happened and we shifted from full face-to-face to modular distance, we did some training on modalities, right? But of course, we cannot expect teachers to already embrace everything. In terms of the skills and the talents, as you were pointing out, in the delivery of distance learning, it's not something that can be done overnight. And because all this will have profound impact on teacher preparation, there is a need for continuing professional development for teachers, and how to handle not just the technology but also learner behavior when they're doing this, engaging in the learning activities offline or online. And in fact, I remember when I was discussing this with my professor, Lalita Rajasingham, in New Zealand, and I was very, very interested in a research which will explore how Hyflex learning will be done in the Philippines. And she said, I want to caution you because, research, initial research, at least in distance learning, has indicated that this has not succeeded very well. I mean, it has not really indicated some very good results insofar as basic education is concerned. So, so a lot of things will have to be, in fact, a lot of things will have to be taken care of. Conditions will have to be there, institutional in terms of policy, whole of government approach. For instance, infrastructure and connectivity and so on will also be a factor in the Hyflex hybrid learning. And we can only maximize whatever we have right now.
Yeah. I like that disposition. Let's maximize what we have right now, including the mishaps and probably the problems you encountered. They are all part of the equation. I see the hand of Dr. Chow. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, John. One of the things the reason why I raised my hand is because John mentioned one important point in particular is assessment. And the recognition of society and stakeholders. Stakeholders still have not adjusted to the fact that there is a possibility that the quality of learning of distance education may be at par or better than face-to-face. Okay, so I'm not saying it's a fact. I'm just saying it's a possibility. However, we do need stronger and effective quality assurance and assessment procedures. I've seen what's happening over the past 2 years, and well, the students are basically not generally, but a lot of the times the students has been supported, or even most of their work has actually been done by the parents, particularly the moms. So that's the key issue. So how do we ensure that the actual activities and the actual work are done by the kids or the students? That's one issue. At least when you're in the classroom, you know that the students are doing it. So that's one core issue. The second major issue that we need to look into is this culture and bias towards face-to-face and non-traditional learning. I have been advocating that learning can be done not only in the formal sector, but across sectors. In fact, I was just part of well, this is for higher education though, for focus group discussion and for the World Conference in Higher Education. And I mentioned that we have to incorporate and look back towards the notion of lifelong learning and frameworks where everyone can learn within informal, non-formal, and formal sectors, but we have to focus on the actual learning. So even if you don't participate, you do learn something, and then we have to reframe it. Of course, I'm not saying that people will listen to what I have to say, but during all the, well, not the Middle Ages, but the start of the education systems and all this, before the modern education systems, or even when it started, learning has always been done differently. You have the guild system, the apprenticeship system, you have a master scholar having this apprenticeship and something. So the change in culture and accepting non-traditional learning modalities needs to be addressed, especially from our stakeholders. When I was in Myanmar, the computer universities and colleges of computer sciences were actually the formal sector. And there was, I think, the Myanmar computer something community, which are the stakeholders who actually delivers training programs with collaboration with Microsoft. And industry actually prefers the graduates of the training programs than the graduates of the computer colleges. Okay, so this is a concept of the importance of stakeholder recognition of non-formal degrees compared to the formal degrees, because of the perception of quality and the assessment procedures that were very strict, considering they have to partner with Microsoft during the time as well. Yeah, thank you.
Very interesting, Roger, that you mentioned. So this is not just about the delivery, the design and delivery of education provisions, but the very question of what is it in the education space that we really need to zero in on so that the graduates can respond to whatever industries out there are asking. And your illustration of Myanmar is a very good case, actually. No, so now that we see that yes, there are challenges, there are uncertainties, and even ambiguities in the way we look at the transition to hybrid learning, from infrastructure all the way to the essential content, the assessments, and so on and so forth. And with the affirmation that has been provided by Director John on what is happening in the Philippines, I'd like us to turn towards a different side of the issue at the moment. And thank you to our participants who are actively placing their insights over our chat room. Please keep typing them in and we'll try to respond and include them in our discussion. You see, Sarah has a narrative to share with us on the transition of education and training specialists during the COVID-19 crisis. But to set a little context into this, I'd like us to be mindful that when we defined flexible learning in 2020, at least at the level of DepEd and CHED, we were looking at the design and delivery of programs, courses, and interventions that address learners' unique needs in terms of four things. That's the pace, how fast or slow learning should take place. The place, where is it going to happen? The process, how will you actually engage in the learning process? Especially that we have issues on under-resourced environments. And Roger mentioned the last P, that's product of learning. So that's pace, place, process, and products of learning. But in the literature, it's defined that flexible learning has to increase two things: learner control and the customizability of learning. Because if you cannot provide much agency and control to the learners, which we have experienced during the pandemic, then likely there's not much customization of learning happening as well. So given this, Sarah has been working with some groups also and specialists on how you can actually respond to these things. But we are going to ask from her, what do you anticipate as further needs of the education and training sector in view of the transition from what I have just described as flexible learning to Hyflex learning, where it's no longer just balancing pace, place, process, and products, but you have to iterate and do a lot of changes in a very agile manner. So Sarah, please go ahead and share with us your insights.
Yeah, so prior to answering Doc Ed's question, first I'd like to understand who are these stakeholders who are severely impacted by COVID-19. So I'd like to divide this discussion into three parts. So first is, what are the needs of the parents? What are the needs of the educators? And what are the needs of our teachers? Okay, and especially our students. So because of COVID-19 pandemic, many have suffered. Students found themselves working, parents found themselves working and learning alongside with their children. And then these kids transferred from private schools to public school and homeschooling. And we also have those teachers who have been transitioned or received trainings from face-to-face online, from face-to-face to online. Okay, so I think for the individuals or for the children or for the kids, meeting individual students' needs or students' experience with remote learning has not been like a one-size-fits-all. Okay, while some never want to learn online again, others have thrived outside physical classroom. So Hyflex courses offer more options for success, especially for those with neurodiverse students or those students who are juggling the demands of family or jobs. Letting students choose the way they participate in classes makes them much more likely to do so. And another one is addressing the unique needs or unique learning style of each of every student. So as we transition to high flex learning, it is crucial for us educators to understand that these unique learning style or these unique learning needs of our students should be addressed carefully. And therefore, we'd like to understand that as we prepare our educators to hybrid workforce, so when, for example, our teachers graduate, no, many will be heading into the world where hybrid work is the new normal. And therefore, according to Future Forum survey that was held before regarding the knowledge workers, 70% 76% wanted to work flexibility or wanted to work in high flex setup. So high flex courses, therefore, in colleges and university have helped students, future educators, to prepare and thriving to the new hybrid workforce. Students or future educators learn how to collaborate effectively during hybrid meetings, plus they can develop a variety of asynchronous communication skills. So yeah, I think that's it, Dr.
If I list down those things, I think Director John can already create a syllabus of some sort in the next training session. No? But I like what you mentioned, the ability of the teacher to determine at which point should the particular modality become helpful. That's something that we really haven't found out yet or discussed. And that's why I agree so much with what Dr. Chow mentioned. We need evidence from the field. Yes, we have seen excellent teachers who have been able to make immediate decisions. This one I will design in this way and deliver in this format. But then again, there will become points when, wait, some learners aren't prepped for that well. And so it's likely that parents will complain when the modality is like that. And eventually that complaint of the parent reaches the supervisor, reaches the school head, reaches the superintendent, reaches the regional director, all the way to the DepEd secretary. And I think this is the point when Director John comes in. Director John?
Yes, Doc Ed, because you pointed out that this is something that we need to already introduce in our curriculum. but just to point out as well that in the training that we gave to our school heads and to our teachers, we introduced a technology, quote unquote, which is the decision tree, which evaluation of the learners, and based on data, what particular modality will be appropriate for your specific set of learners. So, in other words, we already considered that different teachers and schools will have varying preparedness, level of preparedness, and therefore they need to have some reference as to how they make decisions like this, because this is very critical. And when you deliver education, it has to be something that is adapted to the context of the learners. It may not necessarily be very, very successful, but I think that we have already laid down the foundation for making decisions like this at the ground level. Just to point that out. Thank you.
Yeah, Roger, you wanted to say something? We're eager to hear your insight. Go ahead, please.
Yes. One of the things I actually think we should incorporate or at least discuss during this forum or panel is that the added burden of preparation and delivery of high flex learning for teachers in particular should be discussed. We already hear discussions on teachers being overloaded, working all the way to the evenings, and added work because of the how teachers are, especially Filipino teachers, are in terms of their students going beyond their responsibilities, especially students who are lagging behind. They go to their houses, talk to the parents, and all these things. And the preparation of high flex learning, especially in the first few times you actually use the same curriculum or the same materials that you're going to use, is significant. And our teachers are, well, we all know they're already overloaded, and they do need to have quality time to be refreshed, particularly spending with their parents, the family, and to a certain extent, even us, we have to be refreshed sooner or later, otherwise we burn out. So that's something we probably need to discuss as well. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. No, I forgot to prompt earlier that after Sarah's sharing of her narrative, we will now drill down into at least 3 top competencies that future high-flex teachers and trainers should possess to run the high-flex learning environment. And we will ask that from the more seasoned educators and trainers like Roger and John, to tie that with the information shared by Sarah earlier. But before Director John and Dr. Chow give their top 3 competencies, no, I would like our participants, our attendees, to go to the chat room, or if you're in the live broadcast, you can write in the chat space as well. Give me one of the skills or one of the traits that you want to see a high flex teacher to be able to demonstrate very well. Let's do a quick waterfall survey on our chat room. Again, to our attendees, think of just one word that will characterize. If you will be hiring a high flex teacher or trainer, what do you want to find in that candidate? Let's spend a minute to do that. And meantime, we will ask Roger and John to prepare for the response on our next question. So please go ahead. I see some words appearing in our chat room already. So think of the fact you are hiring a high flex teacher. What are you going to look for? The more concrete that is, the better. For example, can do multiple screens. Or what else? Can change costume in the blink of an eye. Okay, so there's some words coming out there, and I'd like our panelists to have a look. Okay, there's tech savviness, multitasking. Some are giving multiple answers here. Adaptive. Okay, let's ask the other members of our audience to just keep on writing down those answers. There's interactive. Can manage both online and offline classroom setting. There's the big word, innovative, adaptive, flexible, agile, okay? So multitasking, techie or tech savvy, all right? So as the words are coming out, oh, there's a new word that came out, mindful. Thank you, Ruth, for adding that. It's a unique response so far. We'll be asking Director John and Dr. Chow. Our colleagues have spoken, but from your perspective, what top 3 competencies would you require from future high flex teachers and trainers? Would you like to begin, Director John?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, I think in my list, on top of my list, this has already been mentioned by Sarah, and also some of our colleagues from the participants. I think one of and this is a very general competency, which is like you're learning to learn and the ability and the agility to adapt to, because this is a world of surprises. A lot of things are happening, and changes are, they just happen on a very regular basis that we have to also question whether what we're doing is okay or appropriate, and so on. And that's why learning to learn, and that mindset to always question what we're doing in the context of all these changes and whether they are working or not, and so on, and be able to introduce new things into your practice as part of your continuing development. Now, having said that, I think one part of your agility to learn is your ability to design learning experience with technology, particularly, for example, artificial intelligence, if you refer to a specific technology that aids learning, gamification, for instance, right? So all these technological, uh, exoteric technology that has been introduced in the education system, but we should be ready to learn them. But making sure that the designing part is really within the control of the teacher. I mean, while you cannot control what is happening in the classroom, but at the very least, you must have a design in mind how learning should happen in the classroom, and that is teacher preparation. So I think, and given the Hyflex environment, you have to make those decisions in terms of the learning experience. So designing learning experience with technology in mind. If you're incorporating, infusing technology in your learning experience design. Then, of course, my third one is really facilitating and managing learning in Hyflex learning environment, because Hyflex hybrid 21st century skills will require different pedagogical orientation. You need to always make sure that your approach in facilitating and managing the learning experience will be appropriate to the conditions of the learners. And again, it's one thing to plan, but it's another thing to really manage it in the classroom with all this technology and all with the Hyflex environment. So I guess these are my top three, Doc Ed. Thank you.
Okay. Director John, while you were mentioning or listing down your traits, which I have summarized in our chat room, there's ability to adapt, learning to learn, ability to design learning experiences with technology, facilitation skills for different settings. I had this checklist in mind. Who among our graduating students will likely be able to demonstrate these things? Because the curriculum for teacher education has some of these in place, but our concept of hybrid learning was actually not within the planning stages of that curriculum when it was built back in 2013, because the curriculum was the curriculum we developed in 2013 was only implemented in 2017. So, and then as the graduates of the revision of the teacher education curriculum from CHED is just about to graduate this year, they took on courses in instructional design, but not learning experience design, which Director John is telling us, because those are two different things, and which NTC is also advocating the shift from instructional design to learning experience design, because things have really shifted so fast. But anyway, let's see this time from Dr. Chow, having the regional and global perspective, what will be your top three competencies so that our deans, associate deans, department heads who are listening right now can already start thinking, how do we enrich the teacher education curriculum? Go ahead, Dr. Roger.
Well, on top of what John has already mentioned and our audience has already mentioned, which are all significant, and the traditional requirements of teachers. I mean, teachers basically need to teach, understand students, design curriculum, and actually deliver and assess students' learning. The three things or three words that I would actually focus on would be strategic, which is basically a strategic mind, so that when you design, implement Hyflex learning environments and programs, you actually have a method already from A to B, where students should be and how you should do it, and you have backup plans as well. So it's basically that, strategic. Second is results-based. At the end of the day, we want students to learn what we want them to learn. The third one is motivation. Teachers should be motivated and at the same time should be able to motivate students to learn and encourage them to learn on their own when necessary, and to learn as a group and encourage them to undertake group learning and peer-to-peer learning at the same time. So these are three words that I actually put on the table. Yeah.
Wow, thank you, Dr. Chow. No? And if I put or juxtapose the characteristics given by Director John and Dr. Chow, you find out that we would like to understand if the current training context for would-be teachers actually incorporate them, and if our current system of hiring teachers also reflects the same expectations. And that is why we will now focus more, we will drive more focus now in the case of the Philippines in terms of determining the teachers who should enter the profession, with the kind assistance from Director Jennifer Lopez of the Bureau of Human Resource Organization and Development over at DepEd Central Office. She sent us a copy of the evaluation criteria for people who will be entering DepEd positions. No? So you're seeing it on the screen right now. So what this slide shows you is that if ever you're thinking of joining the teaching force in the Philippines, particularly the public education sphere, the biggest industry that teacher education institutions are serving, you'd find out that it's a play of points from education qualification, which receives 20 points, teaching experience, 15, the licensure and PBET rating, 15, specialized training and skills, 10, interview, 10, demonstration teaching, 15, and then there's a specific mention of English communication skills at 15. So that gives you a total of 100 points. And some granular criteria for those who will be teaching in senior high school, there's an addition of portfolio and outstanding achievements on top of what you will see as the K to 10 criteria. And there's a variation of points that you will see for those teaching academic and core subjects, TBL, arts and design, and sports. Now, in my short conversation with Director Lopez, it appears that while there's a point-based mechanism in place, and which all of the deans and teacher education professors in the call should know, there's actually a proposal to revamp this. And the revamping, let's try to test our hypothesis, whether we are already mindful of the emergence of the Hyflex teachers that we have been characterizing earlier. So if you look at the proposed revision for the Teacher 1 hiring criteria over at DepEd, it's split as 30% education training experience and 70% evaluative assessments. Now, note that under the 30% column, it's split into 10% education, so a degree, then 10% training, which could be NAEAP endorsed or approved, or if there had been additional training provided to the teachers prior to coming in, or if you have relevant experience related to teaching. And I think this shouldn't consist of the practicum, because that's a part of the education component. And then under the evaluative assessment, there's already a designation for the licensure, a standardized exam, that's 10%. Now, look at the 35% mark, classroom observable strands, which refer, it's fine print, but I will just mention it here. You are looking at indicators found in settings, in teaching settings where you actually deliver well your content, your method, and so on and so forth. And then here's something that surprised me. There's a 25% non-classroom observable strands, which can change from one school division context to another. So I think there's room for some contextualization happening here. No? So I will be asking our panelists, do you think the proposal is mindful of the realities of the emerging Hyflex learning environment and the teacher that we described earlier? Or do you have proposals in mind how these hiring criteria can be made more relevant? So again, we are asking our panelists, Do you find this relevant, or are there things that you want to see more in a granular way to make these hiring criteria or expectations of our would-be teachers more directed towards anticipating the demands of a high-flex learning environment? So let's begin with Sarah, because Sarah, if you're going back to the teaching force, you will be asked to meet these requirements. So what do you think, Sarah?
For this one, Doc Ed, I'd like to add na lang din siguro, one of the qualities that we can have here is to have an educator with good assessment skills. As we transfer or as we migrate to high-flex learning, it's very important for our educators or future teachers to understand on how to assess the needs of students depending on the learning needs or the learning style of each of our students. So as a good assessor, being able to identify and address a crucial component of an educator's job. This is done by partly using formal and informal assessments. So formal or informal assessments such as teacher-made assessments, if I'm not mistaken, it should be added in the in this part, wherein the teacher should create his or her own informal assessment tool. That is also part of the things that we should consider. And other than this, we should involve getting to know students beyond an instructional level, learning about their interests, so the teacher who could learn or who could understand the interests of the student, a teacher who can recognize changes in the mood and making sure that the students are mentally and emotionally focused on learning. So yeah.
Okay, so I think what Sarah is recommending is that we now put in the more observable items probably found in the 35 and 25% items there, no? But thank you. And I am noting down those things, and I am encouraging now our attendees. Please let us know your insights also. You could type them in the chat room, especially that we are about to reach the last two main discussion points, and we'll open the floor for some form of discussion. Now, let's ask the person who's heavily engaged in looking at these criteria, because as soon as the pre-service teacher exits from the college program, they will go through the continuing training from NAEP. So, Director John, what do you think?
Just a bit of context with respect to these criteria. First of all, these criteria have reference to civil service policies, civil service commission policies. So there's there's a room for some innovations there, but basically you have to adhere to the requirements of the civil service. And of course, that's the entire government we're talking about, right? So it's not easy to depart from what the civil service policy is saying. Second, these criteria are also anchored on the professional standards of teachers. If you remember, we have what we call the Philippine professional standards for teachers with 7 domains. And the 7 domains range from number 1, you have the content knowledge pedagogy, learning environment, there's assessment as well. There is a, so in other words, the one that Sarah mentioned is covered in the professional standards. There, okay. So you have content knowledge pedagogy, and so on. So the Doc Ed can actually flash all of these strands and domains in the Philippine professional standards for teachers. However, I'd like to point out as well that when these standards were developed, the context did not consider, of course, pandemic. I mean, this was pre-pandemic. So, so in other words, the discussion on high-flex learning and so on were not very much part of the discussion, except that there's an ICT component to it. If you look at the standards, so there's a sort of positive use of ICT among the standards, and maybe that is the part where online learning may also be considered. A high-flex learning can be considered, but it does not figure very, very prominently in the standards, right?
Right.
So So in other words, the standards were developed within the context of the physical classroom where everyone is learning at the same time under the baton of an expert teacher, quote unquote. So now this is the policy, right? The criteria that you see is a national policy, and this, as you have presented, Doc Ed, we are moving from the one that you presented first, and then we have a proposal for evaluation of teachers, not just for promotion but also for entry to the public school system. Because this is policy, the implementation, the actual hiring actually happens at the school and schools division level. So the interpretation and the implementation and the interpretation of the criteria would heavily depend on what is important to the context of the division. So if you notice that part of the description there was depending on the SDO, what particular aspect of the criteria will be given more importance in terms of the strands, in terms of the observable and the non-observable strands. Now, having said that, therefore, the granular implementation will be based on context, and I'd like to believe that our implementers down the ground are mindful that, given their context, they have to just make sure that when they look at the documents and when they observe the teacher in the demonstration teaching or when they interview the teacher, they focus on those that are important to them. In fact, right now, as part of our preparation for the implementation of this policy is the training of our assessors in the field to assist our human resource committee in the evaluation of teachers in determining what points or how do we give credit to those demonstrable and non-classroom demonstrable and non-classroom demonstrable criteria and so on, and the other things that they need to look at. In other words, from the national perspective, it is quite difficult for us to say that Hyflex learning is particularly given importance in the criteria, but I think that the policy is implying as well that where Hyflex learning is necessary is the practice, is what they expect from the teachers given their context, and therefore the assessors and the evaluators should be able to incorporate this in the actual evaluation. But of course, absent very specific guidelines or, because this is still in the proposal stage, absent specific guidelines, we cannot really tell whether the Hyflex learning will be highlighted in the evaluation. So I guess at this point, that's my response. Thank you.
Yeah, Director John, that's interesting to know because this is a new policy, right? It was only implemented in 2017, and we're just on the 5th or 6th year of implementing it. But we have already asserted that this does not bear the expectations or the realities happening within the context of Hyflex learning. So this is just a quick question, a follow-up question, Director John. Do you see these standards to be evolving or changing further?
I guess, the answer is yes, but not soon. Because you see, the standards have considered, right, the current realities, and, it went through a process of, research, validation, consultation, and so on. So it's very process-driven as well. And if we need to introduce some aspects of the existing realities, Hyflex learning, the role of ICT, and so on, and even designing learning experience and so on, this new emphasis on the learners rather than the instruction itself and so on, it will have to go through the same process. So in other words, the standard will do some catching up somehow, but it's going to be again, it's not going to be very, very soon if we look at the process that we are doing in the Department of Education.
Okay.
So that's my
thank you. Thank you, Director John, and that's very interesting to know, particularly that we have teacher education professors and administrators in the call. But let's ask Roger's perspective at this point. Roger, what do you think should be our what's your perspective on all these things happening in terms of expectations of our would-be Hyflex teachers?
Well, personally, I think first and foremost, let me frame it. The development of indicators or criterias or even expectations are always lagging behind reality, especially if it's something new. Okay. I think we agree. And the process of developing policies takes time. So as you asked John earlier, of course, it will always be changing, but there will be a time lag. There's also going to be limitations because, as we all know, majority of the teachers in the Philippines are in the public sector, and they are governed by civil service laws. So there are limitations to what we can do, in spite of the fact that we can think about how to innovate. Yeah, so we are limited by a civil service framework. In terms of the indicators that are incorporated, yes, as assessment indicators, both observable and non-observable, are very important. There are discussions on the importance of let or non-importance of let. I mentioned that in one of the talks I gave for Teacher Education Council, but I'm not going to bring it here. But the main point I would actually like to highlight is that as teacher educators and stakeholders in the education sector, we have to strengthen quality assurance and ensuring that the graduates of teacher education institutions already have the capacity. And if possible, if that is the case, then where is there a need for further validation of capacity? My personal take is, if you graduate and you have the competencies, then there's no need for a validation through an exam. Okay. Second thing there is, just because you top or you pass or fail an exam does not judge you in terms of teaching efficiency. So this is something we actually have to discuss. I actually talked to former Secretary Balisno on this, and we had a very long discussion with this at her house a few years back before pandemic. So I just didn't want to discuss in public initially, but I think since we're talking about innovation and changing views and Hyflex learning and digital transformation, so I might as well think about it. I am not against, but I think that we need to look into putting in more trust in our teacher education institutions who are working very hard to ensure that our teachers and future teachers are capable enough to contribute to the education sector.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Roger, you just gave me the goosebumps there because we're addressing our deans of esteemed teacher education institutions. You having mentioned the need for validating. Is it a board exam that will lead us towards determining quality? All these things are now coming to the fore because they have to be reframed, given that we have already articulated there are new needs happening out there. I'm interested, Roger, in finding out, in your current regional and global work, are those measures of or measures or standards of being identified a professional teacher, are there ongoing reviews or revamps also?
Actually, no, unfortunately. The problem there is we are inculcated and driven by policies by the Western education systems, and they actually push for a licensure exam. That's the reason why a lot of ASEAN member countries has been in introducing licensure exams in teacher education. Then they have a 5-year re-registration. I think in Thailand it's 5 years. For us, we have the CPDs. I do agree significantly on continuing professional learning, as there's a need to ensure that the skills and competencies of teachers will be updated in relation to what is necessary.
Yeah.
But in terms of, I just feel that, we talk about institutional autonomy, and then we talk about quality of our institutions who undergo significant accreditations across different institutions in national level, regional level, and global level. But then we don't trust them enough to ensure that their graduates, their certificate or diploma actually says that they pass our assessment and they have the skills and competencies required to be a teacher. So and you know, then graduates and even top notchers not necessarily mean they have it already. I would probably advocate more an induction program for a year, where they actually teach and they will be assessed in terms of capacity development, where their strong points and weak points are, how to improve further, and to show that they're actually capable teachers, but not a validation exam.
Wow, Roger, that's I think the next discussion that the teacher education team of PACO would need to focus on, and likely you will be there again as we talk about how we review all these things, no? How quality assurance, validation, qualification standards, and the like, especially that we're talking about the alignment of these standards. And the alignment is happening as a new learning ecosystem is also emerging, no? Very interesting point. So this is now probably one of the things we need to seriously look into. According to Director Jennifer Lopez, per budgetary appropriation of the national government, there's only about 10,000 or a little over 10,000 slots for new teachers to be accommodated on a yearly basis. And this is because there are natural resignations or retirement, and there's a need for a few teaching slots to be accommodated every academic year. No? So that's roughly the number. Yet, we are producing hundreds of thousands of teacher education graduates. And in the last account in 2020, there were nearly 170,000 teacher education graduates and coming from our teacher education institutions. And these people have been trained to focus on serving classroom context, whether online or face-to-face. However, the Hyflex learning and training services sector seem to have opened up new career pathways. An example of which is the group of Sarah, because Sarah is actually hiring education majors not to teach in classroom environments, but in virtual learning environments, not to be assigned a grade alone, but to be coached and to be mentored. So my question now, and this is our final discussion point, and I want our professors from teacher education institutions to chime in also. We are now flashing on the screen our final question. If we train more teacher education and training specialists in Hyflex learning principles and practices, which are also being formed at the moment, which other industries do you see our teacher education graduates being active players in? In other words, it might not only be the classroom where these Hyflex educators will become movers and changers. So I'm going to ask you by way of courageously projecting, where else do we need these Hyflex education graduates? So since I mentioned already Sarah, maybe Sarah, this is your time to explain your emerging sector so that the deans, the associate deans here could also have a sense of what is happening. Sarah, please go ahead.
All right. So I think for this one, Dr. Ed, teaching is arguably one of the most challenging careers out there. And for some, like as teachers, educator, it's like a life calling. However, little did we know that our talents and skills as educators can go a lot further. And in adventure for educators, we offer a lot of different career paths for them. So one of it is as a content creator or as curriculum writer or curriculum developer. So these people or these teachers are in charge of researching and developing a full range of instructional materials for our students from preschool up until grade 10. And these materials are all aligned with the DepEd curriculum, specifically the MELC. Other than this, our content creators include or incorporate various materials and activities that into the basic structure of the adventure program, which relies heavily on technical and, of course, organizational skills of our teachers. One more thing or one more career is the learning and development specialist. So this is basically a behind the scene people, behind the scene educators type of role wherein they will assist those in the classroom by making the lesson plans and teaching the online tutors on how to effectively run lessons online. So for those teachers who particularly love planning, creating, and improving courses, learning and development specialist is one of the careers or career path they can explore. Learning and development specialists also help teachers and administrators not only assigning classes, but also in creating and training instructions for the online tutors of adventure. So yeah, other than that, another career path Ed is the educational consultants. So prior to becoming the learning group head of adventure, I was an education consultant in a STEM-based company headquartered in Malaysia, wherein as education consultant, we give expert advice to various schools and other educational institutions on things like school policies and procedures, some of the tasks or things that we do is we also involve ourselves in advisory positions, like for example in textbook companies, government agencies, and other non-profit agencies. So yeah, you're an education consultant, content creator, or curriculum developer, and then learning and development specialist.
Excellent, Sarah. And I think to the deans and associate deans or program heads listening right now, you should be mindful of this because later we'll show you actual statistics of what's happening on the ground about the emerging disciplines. But first, let's move on to Director John for some other insights. Of course, Director John will tell us, bring them to the department. But the Department of Budget and Management will tell you, oops, we only have 10,000 slots. So Director John, where do we bring
Yes.
our graduates?
Yeah, no, and actually it's quite difficult to imagine, our education graduates going to other sectors outside of the education sector. So I was thinking, but I also know of classmates from college who did not go into teaching, but they went into L&D in certain agencies. Like I have a friend who went to Ayala Lands and did the L&D. And she's doing the L&D, the training of agents in that particular entity. But I also am aware that there are teachers who after graduation did not make it in schools to get admitted to a school. They went into tutorials, but because of the situation now, they have to shift to online tutorial. And even managing online tutorial centers can be part of that, right? But I think more and more, because of what is happening now, and this is really another kind of pandemic, is this issue on mental health. I think our teachers will be very good at counseling as well, and that's where I'm seeing more and more demands coming from. So yeah, aside from the other things, I think Sarah already enumerated the range of possible areas where our education graduates can go, and I could not agree more. Thank you.
Interesting, Director John, and one of my colleagues even mentioned to me, Ed, do you think there's a need for a telecounseling services for teachers? So these are teachers helping out teachers. I told him that it's a possibility, but of course, there are qualifications in place as well. But I think it's something that will emerge sooner or later. So I'm excited because, of course, Roger can tell us more about this in his capacity as someone seeing trends beyond the Philippines. So, Roger, what do you think?
Uh, I haven't really looked at it directly, but my personal observation and listening to colleagues as well, the skill set that teachers actually learn in teaching and learning, the empathy and towards the parents and the students, management skills and administrative skills required as a teacher, not even at the school head level, but as a teacher, are skill sets which actually cuts across significant industries. So outside of the skills and tech requirements from skills related like engineering and chemistry, something related stuff, or even computer science related industries, I think the teacher can actually work in any industry because of
Yeah.
the skill set, especially if they work already a few years as a teacher. The skill set they would learn, and the cultural mindset and the socio-emotional context and awareness required of a teacher cuts across all industries.
Right.
So I will not specify key industries. Of course, there are exceptions to industries requiring specific skills. And the creativity of teachers, especially those at the younger grades, is amazing. I've seen their work, how they can relate and actually engage with younger kids and younger students is something I think any industry would actually want to hire.
Right. Well, thank you, Roger, John, and Sarah, for your perspective. And in a little while, I will share with you some stats that we gathered from the ground and something that I will ask our teacher education specialists in the call right now to be mindful of as well. However, we will need to excuse Sarah at this point because she has to attend to something related to work, but we will be asking our two specialists, Roger and John, to stay with us. And we wish Sarah all the best as you form part of the trailblazers in education and the education and training services sector in the Philippines and even beyond. So once again, thank you, Sarah. But in the meantime, I will be asking our attendees to consider the following data that we found out courtesy of CHED and the ground research or the desk research that we have done. We've asked for data on enrollment and graduates in our education and teacher training programs from 2009 all the way to 20. The one that's available, the most recent set is from school year 1920. So if you notice, it's an oversubscribed program. That's why there's a moratorium in place in opening teacher education programs. Well, the truth of the matter, it's very easy to offer the teacher education programs because compared to other degree programs, you don't need so much of a infrastructure, no? So it's rather very easy to offer. And I think the school owners here understand this quite well. So if you notice, at the height of the pandemic, we actually produced nearly 170,000 teachers. But only a small fraction of that was actually able to enter the teaching profession. So there are some schools who actually laid off teachers in school year 2021, right? So what we had to think about at that time when we were doing this analysis prior to this, you have those numbers. And if DepEd hires only about 10,000 teachers, what will happen to the rest? And in our discussion today, we are actually articulating what options remain accessible to the graduates. Otherwise, we fall into that trap of actually, not being able to fulfill our goal that you will find a job after you take the teacher education program with us. So it bears some form of thinking, where did the students go? And collecting or basing this from various media reports, interviews, we found out that recent teacher education graduates are entering the following career pathways. And it's very interesting. It's true, there are learning and development specialists. These are the people managing the training programs of companies because we have a natural knack of training people. There's also AST or after school tutors. And Roger, I think, knows for the fact that in pandemic China, AST companies became a boom. But eventually, the Ministry of Education had to regulate because more people are thinking that why will I go to schools if I have an AST option? Content developers, standardized test developers, training specialists, virtual assistants. Can you believe this? Virtual assistants are people who organize things for people, and they're being paid a lot. And when I say a lot, thrice the regular salary of a teacher, and they're all working virtually. A childcare worker, especially for those parents who had to leave their kids at home because they are already starting to resume some degree of face-to-face work. Then there's the personal trainer, particularly for those in physical education and health education. And then there's a new work stream coming up. That's ESSA, the Education Solutions Sales Assistant. That means to say these people are part of companies that produce education products and services, and all they need to do is to find the people who will use the products. And apparently, these companies do not know education that much. And so they hire the education graduates to do the talking about the relevance of the product or the service. Eventually, they become after sales assistants in the sense that if they procured, let's say, a learning platform, they become the guides. And of course, a lot of companies resorted to using a lot of research and data analysis platforms to guide their business directions. And because we have at least 3 research courses in our curriculum, the students have what it takes to enter these new career pathways. But part of this is we needed to ask some companies also, so what else are you requiring from the graduates? And I think this is important for all the teacher education institutions represented here today. Believe it or not, the number one thing that they're looking for is communicative competence in English. Second will be facilitation skills. The third is digital productivity competencies. So they need tech. Customer or client sensitivity. Then the items on curriculum development, instructional materials development are found last. They are the ones at the bottom. But they said that if you don't demonstrate number 1, you're automatically out in the race to be hired. And that's a good call out, I guess, for us, not because we don't believe in our mother tongues or whatever, but there's an increasing global space there for qualified people to interact in this type of environment. So this goes to show that it's high time for us to rethink that teacher education students have an edge in pursuing education or training related tracks. But their competencies for the new normal, which is the Hyflex normal, they need to be upgraded immediately. And that's why we are thankful to the perspectives provided to us today by Director John and Dr. Roger Chow, and of course, Sarah and Director Lopez, who, even if she's unable to join us, was able to give us a bit of a perspective. So I think our conversation invites us to rethink so much of what we have to do as members of this space in education, which is actually the training space for would-be teachers. So at this point, we'll transition to asking Director Shena and Dr. Chow, given all these things that we have discussed, what do you think will be the future of teacher education and training services? Is it a bleak future? Is it an exciting future? What do you think? Director John, would you be able to begin the discussion on this part? What do you think?
Yeah, when I was a college student myself, an education student myself, we were trained in, in the way our teachers were trained. And so when I joined the teaching force, I did what I knew was the best way to do it. But things have changed. We know that. And what changed, right? What changed are we are seeing now. They're very, in so many ways, they're very radical in the sense that with the introduction of technology that actually has put into question whether our assumptions about teaching and learning are still the same. And I think looking towards the future, this is a very interesting space. Teaching our learners with skills that were otherwise not taught to us will be, well, very challenging, but also very exciting because that's the future. I mean, we cannot approach the future with a pessimistic perspective. So we need to be optimistic about it. And in fact, as a teacher myself, I always consider myself a learner. So I always adapt. I always try to learn new things because at the end of the day, you have to contribute as a public servant. I have to contribute to this country. And my only contribution is whether I have the capacity to actually perform my job as somebody who is given the opportunity to serve our teachers in their continuing professional development. And to me, that is a rare privilege given to anyone to help our teachers face the challenge of training our future leaders and our future generation. So to me, all these developments, all these discussions, Hyflex and so on, these are all opportunities that we have to want to learn, right? Understand what this is all about and what this means in terms of how we do our job now so that we are better prepared for the future. So yeah, I mean, these times are really very interesting. And I think everybody should be on board.
Wow, that's very interesting to hear from someone who's really overseeing the continuing professional training and development of our teachers. And I think what Director John is telling us, there's so much hope and energy that we need to be mindful of as we continue to anticipate the further changes in this landscape. Thank you, Director John, and we wish you all the best in empowering all our teachers in the field out there. I mean, training 1 million teachers or nearly 1 million teachers is a tough challenge. Now, let's hear it from Dr. Chow. Please go ahead.
Okay. Well, I totally agree with Director John in terms of CPDs and the need for CPDs. And I'm happy John is there and that he's doing a very good job, actually. In fact, I use NEAP and what the Philippines has been undertaking recently in the UNESCO report I wrote for Myanmar. Okay, so it's highlighted. And in fact, I also push what the Philippines has been doing to some countries. Okay, now, one of the things I see in teacher education and how we move forward, we have to consider, if you look at the higher education sector now, in general, and broadly speaking, we focus on internationalization, exchanges, developing professionals that works regionally or beyond the country. Teachers in the Philippines in particular has been moving. You actually highlighted we have 170,000 graduates, but we also have teachers retiring, moving outside the workforce, and teachers moving outside the country as well, and teachers who actually retire for family reasons, so or quit because of family reasons or something. So there is a significant need. And in fact, if I remember right, 2 years or 3 years ago, there was a major report from UNESCO saying that the world would need how many, I forgot the actual figure, but it's a big figure, that the world would need so many more teachers going towards 2030 and even going to 2050. So the importance of teachers should not be seen only in terms of national context, but should be seen in terms of global context, as mobility of teachers has always been one of the strong points of the Philippines. considering the characteristics of Filipino teachers and the actual acceptance and recognition of the capacity of Filipino teachers, which further shows that the quality of teacher education training and teacher education institutions in the Philippines are actually recognized worldwide. So we are doing a lot of things. Of course, we have to adjust because of changing context, changing times, changing requirements, both from industry, from the students, and the environment. However, the best contribution the teacher education sector actually contributes is societal development. We mold citizens, we mold future leaders, we mold professionals, entrepreneurs, politicians. So this is actually the most significant contributions the teacher educator sector actually contributes. We are directly responsible for the teachers who in turn changes the world. I mean, I may be optimistic, but this is something that I truly believe in.
Thank you so much, Roger, and for being an actual example of Filipino pride in terms of our capability to run the education space with you at the helm of the significant offices and networks covered by the ASEAN. I think we will be able to continue impacting on the lives of learners, not only in the Philippines, but in the larger global community out there. So, I have noted that there's just one or two questions that were raised by our attendees. And because we will have a final speaker towards the end, I will now ask that we respond to these two questions. One of the questions I have already given through the Q&A panel, I've already responded to. But there's one question by, this one is coming from Ms. Susie Ayala, which has something to do with, are there specific trainings that have or that can prepare students to do online online tutorial or online services, you know? So first, I will ask Director John to tell us what types of training have actually been provided by NEA for our public school teachers to actually train them to manage not just online tutorials, but online teaching for that matter. And I will ask the same question to Roger. Director John, please go ahead.
Yeah, just to point out that our professional development programs in general are really anchored on the professional standards of teachers, which so in other words, we try to cover those topics that we believe are critical to the successful professional practice. If there is no specific, just to say that there is no specific topic on doing online tutorial, because given the setup now in the Department of Education, where teachers have to, unfortunately, have to also do after hours follow-up and tutorial to our learners. I remember my sister, who is also a public school teacher, she has to bring, in fact, some of her learners to her home just to teach them how to read and so on. But in other words, there is no specific course for that, but it's part of the flow of the teaching practice. And but if there is an opportunity there, and if there's a need that we are seeing for this online tutorial for our public school teachers, then definitely we will consider that. In fact, Dr. Ed maybe can partly answer if the Lunduyan program, which we're doing with NEA, right? The Lunduyan, which is an NTC program, and that is also being co-managed by NEA. If there's a portion there in the program, I'm not conversant with the program, whether a portion of that program for public school teachers also considers online tutorial, to be specific about the question. Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Director John, for the extra plug. But yes, we're doing a national training program called Lunduyan sa Kahusayan, or Center of Excellence, which actually puts in the teachers, supervisors, and school heads within the Hyflex learning environment that we are already envisioning to emerge. Okay, over to you, Dr. Chow.
Thank you, Ed. Well, Can you remind me of the question? Suddenly, I have a
have you found any relevant training for teachers to engage as online tutors or online teachers? Probably one or two outstanding programs that you have seen.
In particular, if you're talking about tutorials and how to train them, I think the private sector is actually doing that rather than government sectors. I'm sure they are available. I'm not particularly familiar with any one of them, but I do know that a lot of countries, not only limited to ASEAN countries, has been significantly doing capacity building workshops for teachers, particularly for the online learning. Let me highlight the Commonwealth of Learning has been a significant driver of online education and digital education, and I think they've been there for how many decades. There's also the International Institute of IITE, the one based in Moscow. They do workshops, they do reports on pedagogy, particularly the use of ICT in education. There are a lot actually, but it depends on which context and what area you're looking at. A lot of these programs are actually free. There are a lot of free programs. But it depends on the context. Because talking about how to teach and how to actually do online tutorials depends on which area you're going to be part of. Are you going to be designing it? Are you just going to be delivering it, utilizing technology, or what? So but there are available.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Chow. And I think that question came in at a time when we were actually discussing what else can we put in the teacher education curriculum. So Professor Ayala, yes, go ahead.
If I recall right, there's something but in Europe that does training on European School Network or something. I forgot, but tell whoever's asking to look at Europe. Europe offers a lot of online programs, and I'm sure they develop something for digital tutorials and actual delivery of practices of teaching on virtual mode. There are available ones. I just forgot the name. But
okay,
there is a bit.
So what we're gonna do for the information of our audience, thank you so much, by the way, Dr. Chow and Director John. If you gave your email addresses, and which you did, I think, because you registered, you will all be receiving a link to a curated set of resources intended to describe the Hyflex teaching and learning environment. And this is part of the service of National Teachers College in collaboration with the Philippine Association of Colleges and Universities, so that together we may better be able to understand the changing dynamics of the teacher education and training services sector. So again, we'd like to express our deepest gratitude to Dr. Chow and to Director Shena. Let us give them a virtual round of applause. And hopefully in our next set of discussions for teacher education, we will find them joining our panel again. Thank you once again. In the last segment of our conversation this morning, we have invited the director of the Center of Educational Technology of the College of St. Benilde, who has backgrounds in counseling psychology, anthropology, and learning and teaching, and is actually going to let us know more of how the Hyflex learning environment fueled by appropriate and meaningful technologies can become a potential game changer. So please welcome at this point, Dr. Rogelio B. De La Cruz Jr. Good morning, sir. The virtual stage is yours.
Good morning. Good morning. Let me clarify, I'm not yet a doctor.
Okay, sir. Go ahead.
Just call me Tujel. Call me Tujel. So can I share my screen so I can present, or I'll just talk? Or
you may present, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I was tasked to share our experience. Let me clarify first. No, this is not a best practices sharing. Just a disclaimer. No, we're still in the process of piloting in a small scale our our thoughts and ideas on what Hyflex should be. But of course, Hyflex is just one of the many configurations of blended learning in general. No? So let's just put that in context. No? Again, good morning, everyone. I'm Rogelio de la Cruz. You can call me Tujel. I'm from the College of St. Benilde, and I'm the director for the educational technology. So very interesting discussion for that I've heard a while ago. And just to share with you, we are providing training for teachers for online learning, pero internally pa lang. But we were tapped by CHED August 2020 when they did the Bayanihan program. We were the first school who responded, and we were able to at least train 500 teachers nationwide. No? Yun yung parang ambag. Of course, we were ready for online at that time. I remember our during the first few weeks of lockdown, we already have our online learning policy. No, 2019, we already have that. And I remember on a Senate hearing, College of St. Benilde was even called out, no, to stop online learning because it was anti-poor. No? May mga protest sa mga estudyante na itigil yan, anti-poor yan. So kami na lang kasi, we were the last of the schools conducting online learning. No? And of course, we were directed by our administrator to stand down. But after a month, when the whole Philippines, the whole world realized that this pandemic will not be a 1 month thing, CHED came to us and sought our help if we can train teachers to do online teaching. And of course we did, we responded. But to put everything in context, so the first question is what is the right blend? No? How do we implement blended learning? I remember 2019, I was invited already by PACU through Ms. Samaniego and Ms. Susie Ayala to talk about blended learning. I remember I was part of the panel with Mr. Julian Iballe of Canvas. I remember that 2019. And we described how to implement strategically blended learning. So at that time, we didn't have a concept of Hyflex yet. We were only discussing blended and hybrid. That was the only term we were using at that time. So we talked about that, but of course, a lot of things happened during the pandemic, and there were new insights and learnings we got from these 2 years of being locked down. No? Okay. So, but let me just start. Whatever we are doing, gusto kong sabihin na nag-agree ako sa lahat ng sinabi ng mga panels po kanina na let us be focused on the teaching and learning. No? Technology is just a tool. Sabi nga nung aking philosophy professor, technology is amoral. No? It's neither good nor bad. No? It's morality, if there's such a thing, no? Technology morality. It's goodness and badness, kung may term bang ganun, lies on the intention of the one using it. No? So depende sa purpose natin. Ano ba yung main goal natin? That is teaching and learning. So technology is just or should just be secondary. No? But of course, may mga implication yan siya. And one implication of technology use is that it magnifies everything. It magnifies, sad to say, it magnifies your being a bad teacher. No, kaya yun nagkakaroon ng masamang imahe si online. Hindi pangit si online kasi hindi naman pangit si online, pangit yung design nung pag-run ng online teaching. Kasi when online teaching is designed carefully, it can be, sabi nga ni Sir Roger kanina, it can be one of the most compelling and engaging teaching delivery if it's carefully designed. Problem is, hindi lahat ng teachers natin ay equipped to really design an engaging online learning. So ganun po yung nangyari. But of course, the other side of it, double-edged sword nga siya. It magnifies your being a bad teacher. If you use technology, mas magnify yung pagiging bad teacher mo. Sad to say. Pero kung good teacher ka, mamamagnify din niya yung pagiging good teacher mo. You will be brought to situations where you are not aware na possible pala yung ganong learning, like being able to collaborate to experts abroad, something that you are not able to do on a face-to-face thing. No? Ngayon, meron na tayong mga tinatawag na COIL program, yung Collaborative Online International Learning, na nangyayari na hindi natin siya nagagawa before. So yun, namamagnify siya. So kailangan lang baguhin natin ang mindset ng mga admin natin. Yung technology, hindi lang siya for IT, pero yun nga, dapat meron kang team that bridges the gap between the technology world and the academic world. At yun na nga yung mga edtech teams na dapat nag-bridge ng digital divide. Pero itong edtech team nito, dapat ang isang pinaka-main criteria ng pagbuo, dapat sila magagaling na teacher. Hindi pwedeng hindi sila magaling na teacher. No? Hindi sila dapat tech person lang. Parang kahit tanggalin mo yung technology ngayon, dapat magaling pa rin silang teacher. Yun yung requirement ng edtech team. Lahat ng eskwelahan meron po niyan, kailangan lang po nyong hanapin. Anyway, so yan po ang ginawa namin, pinatibay namin ng human resource capacity. Kaya nga po nakapagbigay kami ng training sa CHED noong August 2020. Mga 50, parang ang tawag ko sa kanila, mga Navy SEALs ng Binild teachers. Kami po yung nagbigay. Hindi po sila mga perfectong teachers, pero yun, ang common denominator nila ay outstanding teacher sila. Tapos yung iba nangangapa pa rin sa technology, pero the love for teaching is there. So, then suddenly, we were gaining ground, but the world was temporarily closed. Nagmadali. No? So, then na-realize natin hindi pala lahat ng teachers merong digital content. No? Converting the teacher's digital content is one thing, and creating quality digital content is another thing. Gusto ko ulit kampihan si Sir Roger dito kanina. Wala pa ho tayo dun sa quality digital content. No? Malayo pa. Kaya yun nga, kung sasabihin, what industries ang pwedeng makipartner dito? Ito, baliktad. Hindi po yung education ang kukunin ng mga industry. Pero sa sitwasyon po namin sa Binild, dahil meron po kaming School of Design and Arts, tinap po namin ang mga digital film faculty, yung mga film industry practitioners to help us to create engaging and compelling content, digital contents. Sila po yung magandang itap naman natin sa education. Parang think National Geographic, think Discovery Channel. These are all digital content, but they are all technically and artfully done. No? Pero educational content po siya. So hindi ko sinasabi na dapat lahat ng teacher maging ganon, pero maganda po natin gawing goal yon na para mataas yung quality ng ating content. Anyways, so ngayon meron tayong insights na nakuha. Meron po kaming ginagawang action research ngayon. Tinatanong namin yung mga estudyante na ano yung mga takeaways na nakuha mo nitong remote learning nitong pandemic. Sana po matapos yung action research para ma-share namin yung datos. Pero generally, ang mga maganda pong lumabas doon ay una, hindi na po kami magko-commute. Tapos naging mas understanding ang mga teacher. Tapos very interesting, no? Maganda po ngayon, sir, kasi nung dating wala pang pandemic, hindi napapag-usapan ng wellness ng learners. Pero ngayon pinag-uusapan na kahit math teacher ko po, hindi ko sinasabing mga math teacher hindi concerned sa wellness, pero ngayon po kahit math teacher ko talagang concerned siya sa wellness namin. No? So naging sensitive ang lahat ng teachers sa general wellness ng lahat. Dahil ngayon lang kasi naman tayo naka-experience ng pandemic. So ganun po. So yun yung mga insights sa sana dalhin. Meron pang isang estudyante. Sir, sana pagbalik natin ng face-to-face, parang para tayong family reunion na yung babalik kasi matagal tayong nawala, matagal naming di nakita yung iba graduate na. So sana yung experience niya parang family reunion. So dapat ganun yung mga i-create nating experience pag tayo yung magfe-face to face, hindi tayo babalik lang sa the usual. Kasi some of the lectures, kaya na yung gawin online eh. So dapat pag magfe-face to face tayo, yung mga premium experience ang ibibigay ng mga universities at ng mga eskwelahan. So then suddenly, we are open. No? Bukas na ngayon at nagkukumahog lahat ng administrators and schools. Papapasukin na ba natin ng 100%? Hindi pa nga ready and naggawa po kami ng survey. Ang nakuha po namin dito sa Binil, hindi po lahat ng parents ay willing pabalikin ang kanilang mga anak. At meron din naman nagsasabing ayaw na namin ng online kasi yung mga lab subjects kailangan magawa na ng anak namin yan. Nagbabayad kami. So those are some of the realities that we have to contend with. So kaya nga, yun, nung nagtatanong kayo, is Hyflex the answer? At this point, hindi pa po namin siya masagot ng ano, pero naghanda po kami. No? Ito po yung mga proposed things na ginawa po namin sa Binild. Kaya tinawag namin siyang Binild Blend. No? Kaya blend. So the model we used was the one used by Blended Learning Universe website by Christensen Institute. I'm sure it was also the one commissioned by UNESCO. Kung titingnan nyo po yung review of related lit ng mga UNESCO document, nandoon po sila. Isa po sila sa mga naunang, wala pang pandemic, kinonfigure na po nila to. Hindi ko na po isa-isahin yung mga setup na to, pero yan po yan. Pero magfo-focus po tayo sa dalawang bagay na tinitingnan ng configuration. Number one is the interactivity level. So hindi ko na po babasahin yan. But ito po yung mga important questions na kailangan nating sagutin. As far as interactivity level, no? What degree of interactions occur? Interaction occurs between, number one, learners and instructors, learners and other learners, or sama nyo pa dyan, learners and content. No? Kung mag-i-interact sila sa content, kung yan video ba or AI or something. No? And the other one, yung external community, kung meron ka mga yung NSTP mo, service learning, all those things. What type of interactions should be there for the course or the subject or the instruction to be engaging and meaningful? Now, once you have configured or answered those questions, may mga ginawa po kami, may papakita ko po yung grid. Kung madidetermine mo na high ang interaction, moderate ang interaction, and low interaction, you can at least categorize a specific subject. Ito high ang interactivity nito, so dapat ganito siya. But that's one variable, interactivity level. The other variable that we would like to look into would be the learner control. Ito po yung learner control. These are the questions that you administrators should answer. Now, what degree of control do learners have over there? Number one, ito, importante, yung learning space. Ano ba yan? Lab ba yan? Standard lecture class? Lalabas ba sila? Tapos pag ginawa mo yung Hyflex, gagalawin nyo ba yung sectioning sa registrar? Paano yung schedule? Kailangan ba may batch? Those are parang sa una hindi nyo naiisip pero masakit po siya sa ulo. Pag ginalaw nyo yung sectioning at na halimbawa, sige, separate natin yung mag-online, separate natin yung face-to-face, mababawasan yung number of yung class size, may cost implication po siya. So yan yung mga kailangan yung sagutin as an administrator. Yon, sagutin nyo siya honestly. Ano yung kaya nyong gawin? Kami po, hindi namin ginalaw yung sectioning. Mag-a-adjust kami sa capacity ng teaching. Kaya mag-Hyflex tayo. Tas mas mura pong bumili ng mga simpleng aparato kaysa yung bumaba yung class size mo, yung cost implication niya po medyo malaki. No? So I'm sure alam po yan ng iba, lalo na yung tumitingin sa enrollment. Tapos anong klaseng task ang gagawin? Learner control. What type of learner control in the task? Is it problem-based learning, collaborative, goal-based scenario? All those kinds of pedagogical design. No? Because it will determine what type of learner control should there be, no? Or simpleng ano lang yan, parang quiz, online quiz. Kasi kung nandoon pa rin tayo sa online quiz, degradan, medyo mababang form of assessment pa ho yan. Kung nandiyan pa rin po kayo, as a school, medyo kailangan nyo, I have to be blunt, kailangan nyo na pong baguhin yung assessment instrument nyo, gaya ng sinasabi po ni Sir Roger kanina. No? Kung nandoon pa lang lahat ng klaseng assessment natin, hindi po siya mag-work sa digital. Hindi naman hindi mag-work, pero mababaw na klaseng assessment lang po siya. So, now, how much learner control is considered? You have to decide. So ngayon kapag na take into consideration na po yung dalawang variable, ganito po yung lalabas na na grid, no? Learner control sa kabila, learner interactivity level, magkakaroon tayo ng 9-box grid. With yung upper right, third to the upper right, yan po yung magiging parang high learner control and high interactivity. Ang mga sample po niyan, yung mga capstone courses, thesis courses, yung mga gano'n, no? High ang learner control, high din ang interactivity. So yan yung mga subject na yan. Pag high siya, mamaya ipapakita po natin, makakategorize nyo po yung mga subject kung saan siya magfo-fall. Tapos nakagawa po kami ng ganitong ABC hanggang I na 9 categories. So kung saan mag-fall doon yung subject, then yun yung klase ng learner activity, yun yung klase ng blend na kailangan niyang gawin. So papasimplihin po natin, ganito po siya. So kapag ka 40% yung online unsupervised learning, low po siya. Kapag moderate, up to 60% online unsupervised learning sessions. Pag up to 80% online or unsupervised learning sessions, so online siya. So ganun po yung blend na ginagawa namin to categorize the subjects. Ngayon po, nag-utos na po yung aming Vice Chancellor for Academics at pumunta na yung bawat chairs and deans. Okay, identify nyo lahat ng course, gamitin nyo itong grade na to, tapos yun. Ngayon, kami naman mga implementor, kukunin namin dyan alin yung high, moderate, and low. Tapos doon po namin yung bibilangin kung ilan ang estudyante yung papasok, ilang classroom ang kailangan ilalagyan ng setup, ilang teachers ang ipaprioritize sa training. Para hindi po tayo basta na lang bibili ng gamit tapos hindi mo alam na hindi naman pala gagamitin lahat. No? Magiging purposive po tayo. So again, ulitin ko, nagagawa na po namin yung Hyflex on limited classes. Isa po ako sa nagte-testing noon. In fact, after po ditong presentation, may klase ako mamaya. Te-testingin namin. Papakita ko po sa inyo yung dalawa po ang ginawa naming setup. Yung premium at standard. Yung premium ay nandoon po sa mga lab classes, yun, no? Ito po yung sample. So ito po yung plan of action muna bago ko po i-share, no? Blended Learning Course Delivery Decision Framework Model, ito po yung ginawa naming grid. Tapos curriculum integration ng mga bagay na yan. Kaya tama po yung sinasabi ng mga panelists natin kanina. Then, pag nagawa po yung mga curriculum integrations, pati yung scheduling, preparations ng rooms, saka lang po tayo titingin ng mga relevant technologies available. Now, if you have, kami po kasi noong 2016 pa lang, dinitch na namin yung, we already replaced our projectors with LED TV dahil we launched our mobile learning program at that time. So nag-LED TV na po kami. So ibig sabihin, may TV na kasi maganda pong gamitin yung TV. Papakita ko po sa inyo kung paano po gagawin. So yan po yung mga tatlong bagay na importanteng i-consider ng mga administrators ngayon. Tapos, gumawa po kami ng floor plan sa ito typical multimedia lab po namin na aligned sa IATF social distancing policy. No? May sinet pa, dapat ang classroom mo ganito. So, hindi ko na isa-isahin ko na pero nandiyan po yung webcam, may monitors, may projector. Ganito po yung itsura niya. No? So, nandiyan po yung parang auto-tracking camera na may AI. Tapos, yung teacher naka-project dyan dito. May webcam that nakatutok po sa mga estudyante so that online students can interact with them as well. Pag tiningnan nyo po, ito po siya. Tapos yung LED screen, mga 65 inches po siya. Yan. So dito po yung teacher, kung makita nyo po, yan, kung makita nyo po merong acrylic plastic kasi required po siya ng IATF. Dapat may ganyan, no? Titingnan nyo po siya dyan. Tapos may dalawang monitor si teacher para makita yung both online and face-to-face students. Tapos yung gallery ng Zoom, yung presentation niya, tapos yung gallery ng Zoom. So makikita nyo po ito yung acrylic plastic acrylic barrier na nire-require ng IATF. So sinunod po natin yan. So these are the sample. Tapos importante rin na merong camera na nakafocus sa board or sa teacher na sumusunod sa kanya para pag nagsulat si teacher, kasi nire-request ng ibang mga teachers sa amin, sana pag nagsulat kami, ma-record siya. So okay, pero meron naman pong Jamboard na ginagamit or pwede rin yung papel na lang, wag ka na mag-board tapos may camera, no? So marami pong options, hindi po ito Bible rule sa Hyflex, pero ito yung mga una na po namin ginagawa at based from the feedback, parang nahihirapan po yung mga online students sa auto-tracking cam, masakit daw po sa mata, no? Yan yung mga, kaya wag basta-basta po bibili, oy, Hyflex na tayo, web auto-tracking camera, bili tayo, no? So tingnan nyo po, practicein kung gusto po ng mga estudyante nyo. So yan po, ito yung, this is the parang premium setup po namin to for multimedia labs. Tapos ito naman po, wag po kayong, ito naman po yung basic standard lecture class. May dalawang TV po, makita nyo, isa lang yung PC, tapos makikita nyo po may dalawang medyo mumurahing webcam, pwede na po siya. Para ito pong webcam na to nakafocus sa teacher para makita siya dito rin sa gallery.
Apologies, Professor De La Cruz. May we request that we move towards the synthesis part to give way to the concluding part of our event. Thank you.
Last slide. So this is the basic lecture class. No? So yan, and these are the material or the logistical requirement. You don't have to buy anything, and I'm sure there are already existing materials that you can find. But again, as I said, these are just logistical preparations. The more important preparation would be the curriculum integration and teacher preparation. So that's just, again, let me clarify. These are just the things that we're doing right now. We don't consider it yet best practice. We have implemented it in some classes. We are gathering data yet, and we would be happy to share it with other schools who are interested as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor De La Cruz, and I hope that this has given our participants a snippet of what PACU will be driving as its next learning sessions. It's just happened that we had time to accommodate this today in order to illustrate what the emerging Hyflex learning environment is going to look like. So again, our deepest gratitude to Professor De La Cruz and the College of St. Benilde team.
Thank you.
Once again, I'd like to give our expression of gratitude to the NAEP Executive the NAEP Director John Arnold Shena, and our outstanding researcher, teacher, policy analyst from the Philippines who has now joined the ASEAN team for youth, sports and education, Dr. Roger Chow. Thank you so much, and sa ngalan po ng Philippine Association of Colleges and Universities, ng National Teachers College, ng Private Education Assistance Committee at ng Globe Business Solutions, this has been Series 6 of Usapang Industriya with a focus on education and training specialists in the Hyflex world. Please don't forget, we will be sending you a link to our evaluation form, and only those who will be able to complete the evaluation form will have access to the curated resources on Hyflex teaching and learning that National Teachers College has prepared for PACU member associations. Thank you, and we would like to invite you to participate when you have the time. PACU is already a part of the network of schools, particularly the Coordinating Council for Private Educational Associations, on listening to our presidential candidates in terms of their platform for Philippine education. And the first one is happening on Friday, and you could actually tune in through the Kokopeya Philippines Facebook page. We hope that for those of you who are based in Pangasinan, and if you would like to participate, we will see you at the University of Pangasinan. Muli, maraming salamat po at magkita-kita tayong muli. Thank you, everyone.
Sa gitna ng bawat pagbabago, iilawan natin ang daan. Patungo sa makabagong edukasyon. Buhayin natin ang init ng bagong pag-asa. Globe ay sumusuporta sa pangarap ng bawat Pilipino. Sama-sama, tutuparin natin ito. Globe is with us in leading education forward para sa mas maliwanag na bukas. Tuloy ang edukasyon, tuloy ang pag-asa.
The new school is in! Beating homework deadlines, staying up late to review for an exam the next day, ultimate bonding moments with your classmates, and oh, the smell of fresh notebook leaves. It's fun to look back, sure. But right now, the only way to go is to move forward. Globe is set to make the school year a lot cooler. It's time we create better learning opportunities for students of all ages. And the way to do it is to ride the wave of technology. Imagine waking up to a world where you can learn your lessons even when you're at home, or just about anywhere in the world, all with the help of Globe and its partners. D2L has been transforming the way we see the learning environment for over 20 years now. They continue to keep up with trends and the ever-changing world of technology.
As an education company and a partner to thousands of educators around the world for more than 20 years, our key goal is to help students like you achieve greater heights when it comes to learning. Our Brightspace platform will aid you along the way with its easy-to-use features, complete with tools and functions that will surely give you a great learning outcome. And we're constantly seeking ways to evolve our learning environment so your experience will only get better. You know, honestly, I'm pretty excited for you guys to learn the D2L way.
Globe as an institution is dedicated to empowering every Filipino succeed in reaching their goals and preparing for any challenge they may face. Here at Globe for Education, we can offer you helpful information to empower you in making the decisions required to take your school to the next level. Our wide range of specialized solutions and technologies, as well as our business-grade connectivity, can fit your institution's needs regardless of digital readiness or maturity. Learning never stops, even in these changing times. So together, let's discover new ways to create, collaborate, and communicate. Together, let's recreate the way we learn.
We're so ready for our first lesson. The question is, are you?
PW was founded in June of 1919. They wanted to give Filipinas a better opportunity, a better education so that they could play a more active role in society, but at the same time still being the heart and the foundation of the family unit.
It has produced a roster of alumni who have achieved in their respective field of specialization.
Professors, administrators, and even students are treating each other just like family.
When COVID-19 hit, Metro Manila was declared to be under lockdown.
There was an announcement that there will be online classes and we cannot go back to the classroom.
Can we manage handling classes with this new setup?
Kung mawawalan po ako ng internet, how would I continue my education?
Connectivity and availability of suitable devices was a big issue. So we tried to address that by partnering with Globe. The representatives showed us the capability and the features of the G Suite Enterprise for Education. We decided that this was something that we needed. So the university had shifted to G Suite for Education because of its affordability. And as we continue to evaluate and get feedback, that is when the decision to upgrade to G Suite Enterprise for Education, which was more robust.
They make applications and softwares that are free and accessible to all students.
G Suite offers variety of tools that made it easier for me to think of more creative ways to deliver the instruction.
Faculty members are happy because students are participative, and of course they are not stressed in using Google Classroom because it's really very simple.
Google Docs is really helpful for us students. They have the feature of being able to change or edit or revision directly.
The Google Jamboard sits like an interactive whiteboard which replaces the whiteboard that I use in a regular classroom.
Google provided us a good platform wherein we can mimic the actual experience of our student in campus. We'll be able to deliver what's necessary for our students.
We intend to still continue using virtual learning even after the pandemic.
The technology allows PWU not only to survive, but also to adapt and to thrive in terms of addressing the needs and the wants of the new generation.
With PW's quality education and with the great help of Google and Globe, the integration of both would result to a great future.
Google Enterprise for Education makes PWU future ready because it allows us to deliver education to all of our students regardless of where they are. It will allow PWU to be more resilient, to be less disrupted in terms of delivery of education, of continuity of operations and systems with the help of Google Enterprise for Education.